Here we go with Progressivism Part 4, and we're comparing progressivism and socialism in terms of their views of the existing system and, sure I'll word the question, their long-term goals. Who were the most influential socialists? And from that point on, I'm probably going to send you to the appropriate supplements chapter to look at the actual politics of the first 20 years or so of the last century. Okay, so we're starting to describe socialism, what it is, how it functions. I think I'll first of all dispose of the simple difference between their views of the existing system. Now, progressives are aware that there are, shall we say, rough edges on the existing system, but what they want to do is keep it around by, as I said before, smoothing off the rough edges. What they want to do is to make changes that seem necessary to improve life for as many people as they possibly can. What they are not interested in doing is doing away with the existing system. They believe in the market economy as the system which can and almost always does produce the highest standard of living for the largest number of people. So it's like two people who, the progressive wants to fix up the old car and keep driving it or maybe restore it completely, whereas the socialist wants to get rid of it and get something different. The socialist has no interest in reforming the existing system because in their view, the system itself is the problem. And the only solution is to get rid of the existing system and bring in something different. Okay, so what would that look like? To remind you of the basic definition, in a socialist economy, the government owns and runs the economy. Okay, they run all the major sectors: manufacturing, agriculture, utilities, transportations, banking. All of that is technically owned by the government. Now, the socialists would say, no, you got that wrong. They're owned by the people at large, managed on their behalf by the government. The form this can sometimes take was a certain notorious freshman congresswoman from New York who was a 27-year-old bartender who, in the primary election in 2018, unseated the fourth-ranking Democrat in the U.S. House of Representatives, cruised to an easy victory, and describes herself as a democratic socialist. Now, the socialists who call themselves democratic socialists, and we're going to bring that term back up again here in a minute before we're through, they observe that socialism, and they have a problem with real socialism, is that it is not democratic. It's centralized and it is authoritarian. So we'll get back to that. So they think they can have socialism without it being centralized or authoritarian. And I will attempt to show that it just doesn't play out that way. Either it's not socialism at all or it becomes that way. But I remember hearing a soundbite from this congressperson saying that in socialism, the people make the basic economic decision. I was like, oh my goodness. Whatever reputable institution gave you a degree in economics needs to have their credentials reviewed because you just described a market economy. Okay? In a market economy, sometimes called capitalism, it is completely democratic. 24/7, 365. Every time anybody, you, me, anybody, makes a decision that is in some way economic, all the way from whether to buy this brand of toothpaste or that, what you're going to purchase, how you're going to allocate your own personal resources, what career you're going to pursue, all of that stuff, you make that decision yourself. So how things are, the economic status quo, arises out of the individual decisions made by over 300 million, supposedly, free people. And every time you make a decision like that, you are casting a vote. And the wealthy industrialists whom you loathe so bitterly, even though anymore they're very much on your side, I do not understand them, they work for us. because the consumer is a voter. If they don't satisfy us, they will hurt for that financially. So anyway, where was I? So the socialists want to start all over. Let me take this from an economics perspective, since I have some familiarity with that, having taught it for what was it, 9 years, high school level. Um, Economics, the essential core concept of economics is something called scarcity. That means there is not enough of anything to go around. Okay, we cannot have unlimited anything. And so every nation, every country, you might say, has to make decisions about how to use their existing resources. And if you have a resource that can be used in 2 different ways or 3 different ways, you pick one of those. The others are the cost of that. Okay, you've got some money. I mean, several decades ago, I had a bit of a windfall, and I was trying to decide whether to purchase a stereo system for my car or to purchase a really pretty nice camera that I could use in photographing sports teams, which we did a great deal of for a while. I realized that a car stereo can't buy me a camera, but a camera could buy me a stereo system. So each one was the opportunity cost of the other. You choose this opportunity over that one, and the one you didn't choose is part of the cost. So far, so good. Um, so the way a nation goes about, I'm talking about the nation as a group of people, the way they choose to use their resources, the way they choose to allocate them and to allocate what is produced. They have to decide somehow, some way, what to produce with their resources, what it's going to cost, who's going to get it once it's produced. Their way of doing that is called an economic system. And it comes down to, in broad perspective, really only two. You can either have a market economy or a command economy. All right? Capitalism is an example of a market economy where the market decides. People, consumers, are deciding what to buy, what not to buy, what career to pursue, what not, that kind of thing. Collectively, what arises out of that are the answers to these decisions, to these questions of what to produce. In a command economy, self-appointed government leaders try to decide that. Okay? There are basically two forms of a command economy. What we call socialism and socialism is an example of a command economy. What we call socialism is perhaps more technically called, and you've heard this term lately, democratic socialism. That simply means that this brand of socialist does not pursue violent takeover and a complete suppression of its critics, but they work through the existing legal and constitutional processes. They put their program before the voters. If they get elected, they then implement a socialist program. And then if they get voted out at the next election, they go back and try to figure out what went wrong. The problem is, once they're in, they do not readily relinquish power. And while they are in, they will take steps to ensure or to guarantee that they will not be voted out. And to make their system work, they think they have to actively suppress criticism and dissent. So they inevitably become authoritarian. Now, the other version is more extreme. It's called authoritarian socialism, better known as communism. And communists are all in. They do not. They'll work through existing legal systems if it suits them. If it doesn't, then they will resort to violent overthrow of the government. They will impose themselves on society at large. They will aggressively suppress all dissent, all resistance, and they tend strongly to be aggressively atheistic in the process. What's their problem with people believing in God? Because they honestly, sincerely think that the government is God. Government is the protector. Government is the provider. and they cannot allow competition. People believing in God, that might supersede your faith in governments. You got to get rid of it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Okay. Um, socialists, Socialism and communism both, therefore, are examples of command economies, where the government tries to make the basic economic decisions. In democratic socialist arrangements, usually the government is just dealing with the major components. In communist arrangement, they take it down to the bottom layer. That they try to control everything. That's not usually humanly possible, but technology is hurling us into an environment where I'm afraid it really would be. China is coming very close. And there are people here who admire them very much. Beware of those people. Okay. It all rests on the original modern socialist. That was a German named Karl Marx, who, along with his co-conspirator Friedrich Engels, published in 1848 a manifesto entitled, well, the Communist Manifesto. This launches the communist movement. And they both had to go into exile. Engels went to Ireland, I think, and became a very wealthy commodities broker. Karl Marx lived out his days in London, England, going to the British Museum and writing in German a very thick tome called Das Kapital. That's German for capital. He's credited with inventing the term capitalism. Okay? And he put in play some extremely poisonous ideas. But the thing to come to the matter here is something known as the theory of surplus value. Marx's theory of surplus value is the mainspring of socialism to this day. The idea is that whereas in a regular economics class you would learn about 3 or 4 different factors of production, you have to have labor, human resources, you have to have land, meaning natural resources, you have to have capital, and that can take the form of anything from cash that can be invested or the tools and equipment by which things can be produced, and you have to have entrepreneurship. That's somebody to take this in hand, take the financial risk, organize it, set it up, and make it go. Now, Marx would say that only one of those creates value. Only human labor creates value. Therefore, if you get a job in a factory, what you're doing is creating value, and if you end up being paid low wages for that, and the capitalist, who's the entrepreneur, makes off with the bulk of the value you created, a theft has occurred. The problem with that is that the factory wouldn't be there without the entrepreneur. Now, Marx, some people aren't comfortable with him because he had some pretty nice things to say about capitalism. He thought it was the next to last and best so far economic system, but he predicted it would be overthrown by the workers. But only capitalism could create the industrial base that the workers would then take over. So that's the basis of socialism. So I'm coming close on my time here, and there may be more I want to tell you about Marx and about other socialists who brought this forward of one stripe or another. So I think I'm going to let this go at this point and come back to that in Progressive Era, Part 5.